Welcome to another episode of the Countless Corpses podcast. I'm your host, Michael Nunley, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, James Caudill, to talk about horror movies in depth in the form of infotainment. We'll be talking about behind-the-scenes stuff as well as general trivia and throwing our own 2 cents in about the films. We're just a couple of longtime horror fans talking about horror in its many forms.
Mike, every time we talk about this idea of infotainment, I can't help but think about Buster Rhymes in Halloween Resurrection with his company Dangertainment. If we end up ever doing any kind of like spin-off pods or anything of that sort, I really think that Dangertainment needs to be like the overarching like umbrella company for all this. Anyway, welcome in all as we talk about a great horror movie or movies today. Which one are we going to dive into today, Mike?
Well, last time we talked about the original 1978 film that started the Halloween franchise and is the basis for all the timelines in the franchise, except, of course, Rob Zombie's reboot. On today's episode, James and I are going to dive into the current Halloween timeline called the H40 trilogy with Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. James and I consider 2018 and Halloween Kills to be one movie in the same way that the 78 film and Halloween 2 from 1981 are the same film, as they happen on the same night. But before we dive in, was there anything you wanted to say, James?
Halloween 18 and Kills really just is great as one long movie in and of itself. Kind of like how people think about Avengers in Infinity War and Endgame as kind of one long film. I think 18 and Kills kind of works in that same way together. I know that some folks don't like Kills as much, and I would highly encourage you to watch both films back to back. It's really a lot of fun that way.
Oh, 100%. I would recommend that as well. It's not only more fun, I think it's better that way. I have heard a lot of complaints about Halloween Kills, especially as compared to 2018, and I will admit that Halloween Kills doesn't stand well on its own without the first half of the night from 2018. I mean, it's good but anemic without it. It feels full and fleshed out though when you watch them together, however. But if I could switch gears here, I want to just a little. I want to talk about the timeline. I have watched a lot of horror franchises, and I can't think of a single franchise as convoluted with different timelines as the Halloween franchise. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. With the inclusion of Halloween 2018, there are actually 5 different Halloween timelines in the franchise. The first timeline includes a 78 film, Halloween 2 from 1981, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers from 1988, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers from 1989, and lastly, Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers from 1995. Then there's the second single film timeline of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch from 1982. Then there is the first and second film and the Halloween H2O 20 years later and Halloween Resurrection timeline. That makes up the third one. Then, of course, there are Rob Zombie's 2 reboot films from 2007 and 2009 that account for a fourth timeline. And last but not least, it's the timeline we're talking about today with the 78 film, the 2018 film, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. And just as a little side thing here, if you've been counting along, you'll note that Halloween 18 is the third film in the franchise with that singular title, including the 78 original and Rob Zombie's remake in 2007. But that wasn't the film's original title. Working titles for the 2018 film originally included the likes of Halloween Returns, Halloween H40 40 years later, an obvious play on the H2O 20 years later title from 98, and Halloween The Wrath of Michael Myers. But what is your take on all this timeline stuff, James?
I feel like the producers and the folks behind this Halloween franchise kind of followed the DC Comics route. Every few years you kind of need a new timeline and a soft reboot kind of thing, right? This way you kind of get something fresh. I mean, especially when something's lasted for 40 years. So, I mean, it's probably just a good way to think about it. But I know that not everyone reads comics as much as I do and what you do, Mike, and others. So, I think a good way to kind of compare this is to the idea of the multiverse, kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of gotten into over the last couple years now. I know a lot of folks watch these films and the Disney Plus shows, and they kind of know how the idea of like the multiverse works now. I mean, hell, they explain time travel and people get it. And now we have the multiverse of madness brought to you by, a certain strange doctor and a certain witch. And, it's just really a wonderful thing how much people are talking about this idea of a multiverse. So maybe we can kind of think of these different timelines as a slightly different multiverse with different actions taken after the events of the 1978 Halloween film.
That is not a bad way to do it. I think the multiverse idea works well there. So, I mean, I think that's actually how I'm going to think about it from now on.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Before your idea, I felt like all of the course corrections in the series just kind of pulled me out of liking the franchise as a whole. But plus, I mean, in my opinion, there are a couple of truly terrible films in the franchise. Like, I did not like Halloween 5, Halloween 6, or H2O sequel Resurrections. What I do know is that I liked Halloween 78, Halloween 2 from 81, Halloween 4, H2O, Rob Zombie's remake, but not so much the second one. And I love the first two films in the 2018 trilogy. I can honestly live without the rest of it. But where are you at with the franchise and the 5 timelines, my friend? I know you've been a fan much longer than I have, and I'd like to hear your take on it.
Like, it's a pretty spicy take. Are you sure you're ready to hear it today?
Oh, I'm ready. Bring on the spice, my friend.
Okay, my hot take is there isn't a truly bad film in the entire franchise. Whoa. Okay, there are some that are, I would say are weaker than others. And, there's some that I don't watch as often as the others. But I don't think there's just a truly bad one that I'm just like, nope, I can't watch this. I'm not going to watch it. They can't pay me enough to, It's like, the majority of these movies have really become like comfort movies for me throughout the years. If I'm feeling down or tired or, whatever, and just really can't focus on anything much, I will honestly just turn one of these on and just be enthralled. The only ones that I really don't turn to as much are the Rob Zombie remakes and Halloween 6. And I mean, I'm not saying that those are bad at all. I watched those throughout the month of October, along with every other film that they have. And there's honestly some amazing parts in each of those films. But those just haven't quite reached that comfort level for me just yet. But man, I love this franchise. This was a franchise that really got me into horror movies, and I'm so thankful for that.
I can certainly understand comfort movies. I certainly have my own comfort movies. And I can certainly get that with Halloween, especially if you grew up with them, like you're talking about there. I have several comfort movies myself, but while I don't have a fully comfort franchise. I would say I think Nightmare on Elm Street is probably about as close as I come with that. That was the one that really got me into horror. I think the first horror movie I remember watching was A Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984. So I will also add that Tina is actually the main reason I don't like Halloween 5. Um, Tina ranks up there with Franklin from 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre for me as the most annoying people to ever be in a horror movie. Not only was I just waiting for her to die, I kind of wanted to strangle her myself. No, I'm just kidding. But aside from Tina, actually did like Halloween 5. But I have to ask, comfort movie or not, I mean, what did you think of Tina? And sub question, what did you think of Franklin from A Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, both of these characters were just so annoying. I'd probably have to maybe put Franklin as a little more, annoying. But I mean, I guess his kind of made sense, I guess, kind of throughout the little bit of the movie that he was in. But Tina, I'm honestly surprised she lasted as long as she did. It's like every time you turn around, it's like right there's Michael Myers. And it's honestly like he was just kind of screwing with her like the entire film. If it wasn't for her wanting to get cigarettes there at the store with the woman with the big cookies on the side, I don't think she would have even made it as long as she did. But I'm sure we'll be talking about her soon enough.
So what you're saying there is that cigarettes might have actually saved lives in this case.
First time for everything.
Right? But seriously, it was really only my insistence on watching all of the Michael Myers Halloween films that made me get through it. Tina was just really hard for me to bear. But I'm honestly glad I did. And you are 100% right that we will be covering Halloween 5 soon enough. Here's a little bit of random trivia about the new Age 40 trilogy, though. Halloween 2018 came out exactly 40 years after the original film in 1978. That most people know, but check this out. Halloween Kills came out in 2021, which is exactly 40 years after Halloween 2 from 1981. And last but not least, Halloween came out in 2022, and that is exactly 40 years after Halloween 3 Season of the Witch from 1982.
You know what's weird? I didn't catch any of those last 2 years at all, but you are really right. Like I thought with the COVID pandemic, I thought it kind of delayed things a little bit. And maybe it did, but I think it really works well to have everything being exactly 40 years later. And, I think it definitely makes some sense with the choices in these movies, some of which we'll talk about in this episode. So, Mike, are you ready to kick us off with Halloween 2018?
Oh, I sure am, James. Blumhouse's Halloween was directed by David Gordon Green and written by Green, Jeff Fradley, and Danny McBride. Also, as a quick side note, Danny McBride had just come off of acting in Alien Covenant. I mean, that same month they finished filming when he started writing 2018 with Fradley and Green. Halloween 2018 is the 11th film in the franchise. Originally, it was played like a direct sequel to the 1978 film, but we quickly find out by Halloween Kills that they have rewritten the ending of the 78 film and essentially retconned the previous films into the franchise with various homages and references throughout the Age 40 trilogy. But let's talk about the actors. Jamie Lee Curtis comes back once again to play Laurie Strode, unlike we have ever seen her before. Hell, even Nick Castle comes back to play the Shape for a scene. For the rest of the scenes, it was stuntman James Jude Courtney. But it was not just Courtney that was new to the franchise. Halloween also introduced a new family for Laurie. This new family consists of Karen Nelson, Laurie's daughter, played by Judy Greer, Allison Nelson, Laurie's granddaughter, played by Andy Matichak, and Ray Nelson, Karen's husband, played by Toby Huss. Also, Will Patton comes on to play Deputy Hawkins. Hulk Bulliger plays Dr. Ranbir Sartain, Michael's psychiatrist, and Samuel Loomis's former student. Dylan Arnold plays Cameron Elam, Allison's boyfriend and the son of Lonnie Elam from the 1978 film.
I gotta say, I love the choices that they made in Halloween 2018 with some of the retcons and the casting choices. I mean, I love badass Laurie Strode. Not the Laurie who tried to run away from her problems and fake her own death, like Halloween H2O. But she was really kind of like full steam ahead, like meeting this head on in the movie in her own way. I gotta say, I love some of the new casting choices that they made. I mean, I pretty much love everything that Will Patton does since I saw him in Remember the Titans when I was a kid. It's always nice when he kind of pops up in a film. And honestly, I gotta say, Toby Huss was just absolutely amazing as Ray. I mean, he did just such a phenomenal job. I also have a question for you a little later when it comes to Ray. Just a little bit of foreshadowing for you.
I'm intrigued. But yeah, Ray is a cool dad character that I liked as well. I've got a couple of kids myself, and I would occasionally get to telling a story and share too much with my kids as well. So me and Ray actually have that in common. Will Patton is awesome. I really like him a lot. I have liked him a lot since I saw him in The Postman in 1997, and I was happy to see him in the film. We are 100% in agreement on Laurie Strode being better in the H40 trilogy. While I like H2O, I was never really a fan of the weak and broken Laurie Strode portrayed in that movie. I much prefer Laurie, as my friend Steve puts it, as the Sarah Connor of horror films. The badass Laurie, as you said. I like the idea of strength coming from trauma, and even really terrible things can make us stronger if we survive them and allow them to.
Until now, like, I don't think we'd ever talked about what your friend Steve had said about Laurie Strode is like the Sarah Connor of like horror films. But I gotta say, man, I totally agree with that, especially in this H40 timeline. I mean, I love that. I mean, in H20, she played like multiverse Laurie who ran away, and then her brother tracked her down 20 years after that, to kill her 17-year-old son. And, I do like how she kind of came around to kind of fight in the end, but she was just so much weaker in that movie. And, I just gotta say, I love this like Sarah Connor Laurie in this new timeline. And I really think that Jamie Lee like totally rocked that and was ready for this like fresh take on Laurie Strode.
Oh, me too. And just to break that down a minute for our listeners, let's compare Sarah Connor and Laurie Strode for a minute. You'll find that they both spent years preparing for a coming battle. They both indoctrinated their kids into a life and gave them a worldview that they would need to survive. They trained them, and they both lost their children around the same age for that same reason. Even with their kids, they rejected what their parents taught them and called it all bullshit, only to find out that their parents were right all along. Sarah and Laurie are both badasses, tough as nails, and they're both final girls.
I really kind of have this question then. If there wasn't the Sarah Connor that we know in Terminator 2, do you think we would have badass Laurie Strode today in the H40 timeline?
I honestly think that H40 Laurie and T2 Laurie have so much in common that I would be surprised if Laurie's H40 character was not directly inspired by Sarah Connor. So I'm going to say no. We might have got something close, as I'm sure they were wanting to go a different direction than they did with H2O. But before we get away from our original topic of the cast, I have a little trivia for you. Out of the original cast of the 78 film, only Jamie Lee Curtis, Nick Castle, and PJ Soles, who returned to play the teacher as her character Linda was killed in the 78 film, returned to work on Halloween 2018. Also, Nick Castle's cameo in 2018 as Michael Myers makes him the oldest person to have ever played Michael Myers, as he was 70 years old at the time. He was also he was also the third actor to play Michael Myers more than once, along with George P. Wilbur, who played Michael in Halloween 4 and 6, and Tyler Mane, who played Michael in both of Rob Zombie's Halloween movies.
And I had to watch 18 several times before I even picked up on the fact that PJ Soles came back. I never really pay a lot of attention to the credits. Sorry, everyone that works on the film. I know that's a lot of work. It's bad. I know, but I mean, that was really a cool catch for me when you kind of pointed that out. And I really like when you get those little tidbits. And it was really nice having her back in 18. I mean, granted, if Linda came back, that would have kind of really messed up everything. But just to know that that PJ Soles herself was able to come back just for that one scene was pretty awesome.
Oh, I thought it was too, actually. And after watching the 2-disc set of Halloween 25 Years of Terror and seeing her in the convention and doing interviews, and they even had her on a separate show, I saw how much love she has for the franchise, and it gave me a whole new appreciation for Soles as a person. And don't feel bad about not catching that she was a teacher in that scene. They don't even show her on screen. Well, I guess that's not true. I believe you see her elbow and part of her chest.
Yeah,
for like a second. So I mean, don't feel bad that you didn't catch that she was the teacher in that scene. In fact, the only way you could even have caught it really was if you would have recognized her voice at talking during the scene. But even that has changed since 1978. So you get no demerits from me, sir. Hell, I didn't even catch that until I was doing research for this episode. So we're in the same boat.
Well, I'm so glad I didn't lose my horror movie fan card here, because I'm sure that people's voices are going to change over 40 years. I'm sure her chest and elbows have kind of changed in 40 years too, because people change. But it did kind of take me a while, and that really makes me want to go revisit that Halloween 25 years later documentary. It's really been a long time since I've seen it, but I really want to go back through and watch it again. And I just think it's really cool that she was able to kind of come back.
That was definitely very cool. And on the subject of Halloween 25 years of later, while you have to buy the 2-disc DVD set to get all of the extras and stuff I was talking about, you can at least watch the main movie on YouTube, just FYI.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have to go and watch that here really soon.
Yeah. I would also recommend Halloween 25 Years of Terror to our listeners too. I personally really enjoyed it. So let's talk about the new Michael Myers. Actor James Jude Courtney, who played Michael Myers in the trilogy, actually consulted real-life killers about how to kill people and to make his performance more believable. In his words, Michael has been locked up for 40 years, so he's had a long time to think about killing. But obviously, he is still efficient and driven, so he wanted to make sure people see that in his performance. He was also quoted saying that there is a stealth efficiency to the way actual trained killers works. Movies tend to dilute that quality with dramatic pauses and dialogue, which is a true predator would never waste time doing. That efficiency is what I took to the part of Michael Myers.
So what you're kind of saying here is that Courtney became like a character actor for these films.
Yeah.
It's like, that seems a little freaky to think about that, he met with, killers for these films. But, I really love that bit of trivia. And, James Hugh Courtney is just so believable as Michael, and he really embodies what I expect from The Shape. So I think that was a fantastic thing for him to do. So, I mean, even going forward, like when I think about the idea of The Shape now, Courtney's really going to be who I think about. He did such an amazing job in that role, and it can't be easy to do what he did.
He really did deliver a stellar performance. And like you, with all due respect to Nick Castle, it is Courtney that I think of when I picture Michael Myers now. His movements were perfect and methodical. There were no extra movements, but rather precise and efficient action. Just as a quick side note, I would totally. I'm a horror writer. I would totally go meet with actual killers to talk to them about this stuff if I could. So actually, I thought that was really cool. But if that's freaky, put me on the freaky list.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I guess I just kind of said that because I think like a lot of non-horror fans or non-horror writers would probably see that as kind of, ooh, like that's weird, like right. Cross yourself and all that. But, I love that. And it really does kind of give you that little bit extra. I mean, for you as a writer, especially, like if you could do that, it really just makes your writing just that much more believable because you get to talk with, I guess, the experts, with that.
Yeah, like for instance, with my character Patrick O'Leary, I would have loved to talk to actual serial killers before actually creating him. So yeah, that would have been cool. But we're getting way off topic here.
Yeah.
You
really steer this train back on.
Yeah. You really do get the impression that he's been thinking about murder for 40 years. I have a pretty active imagination, especially as a horror writer, and I can come up with stories or scenarios in at least a generic fashion if given a few minutes. So I'm honestly a little scared of the amount of ways I could come up with to kill someone in 40 years. If that was all I had to think about, and I'm not the embodiment of evil and fate like Michael Myers. Hell, in light of that, I think he probably held back in Halloween Kills.
If you spend 40 years staring at a wall, looking past the wall, looking at this night that you can escape again, and that's all you're really focused on is the killing, I'm sure you've got to find a lot of really creative ways to do that. Because, originally he spent 15 years doing that, and he found some kind of fun ways to do it. So you put another 40 on top of that, and you've got someone, man, who's ready to go.
Oh, yeah. For 55 years total. He sat there staring at that wall with one night of intermission on October 31st, 1978. But I'd like to switch over a bit of to a bit of trivia. Jamie Lee Curtis was originally tied with Danielle Harris and Donald Pleasance for the most appearances in the Halloween franchise. But with Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, Curtis has beaten that record by 2 films. It should be noted that Danielle Harris actually put in a call to get her character Jamie into the new Halloween films, but the studio vetoed it as they were ignoring Halloween 4 through 6, as well as Laurie's other child, John, from H2O.
I love the fact that Jamie Lee has that record all to herself now. It'd be really hard for Donald Pleasance to get that distinction now, since he's been gone for a while. But I really got to say I love it. But what I think would be really cool? When the Halloween 50 timeline comes out, because let's just be honest, we're approaching that. I think maybe we could revisit Jamie's timeline and bring Danielle Harris back. Like, she would have totally different experiences in the 40 years since her movies because she became infected by the evil, right? So I wonder how that timeline would end. I mean, that is like far beyond the nature of this particular podcast episode, so I'll get off that topic. But I've got some ideas, so Bloomhouse, call me.
No, that is interesting, and actually would be cool to watch with your whole Halloween multiverse theory. Just kind of pick up from 4 and 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, like it'd be fantastic. Like, I just love that possible idea. Like, it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I love Danielle Harris. I really appreciated seeing her in the Rob Zombie films as well.
I know. I mean, she's just fantastic. I mean, we can just forget that John ever happened. Like, we can just let's just forget about John. Sorry, John, but you're out. But let's bring Danielle back.
Well, yeah, no offense, Josh Hartnett. We're not capping on you specifically. We just really like Danielle Harris.
Exactly.
But back to the roles in the film. Apparently, the role of Allison, Laurie's granddaughter, became a coveted role for young actresses. Multiple young actresses met with Green and McBride about playing the role, including Lucy Hale and Emma Roberts. But ultimately, Green and Gordon decided to go with an unknown actress, like Carpenter and Hill did with Jamie Lee Curtis on the original Halloween.
I really love that fact that Green and McBride chose to kind of go the route that John Carpenter had done 40 years before and go with that unknown actress to play Allison. I mean, Andy did such an amazing job as Allison, and really looks like she could be related to the Jamie Lee Laurie Strode character. So I really think that was an inspired choice, and it was just awesome casting choice. And I gotta say, I love the energy that she brought to the set.
I also appreciated that they picked up Dandy Matichak to play Allison, just like they hired Curtis in the film. But I mean, it was a little bit different in the hiring of Curtis, being that she is the daughter of horror royalty in the form of Janet Leigh from Psycho in 1960. So there was a pedigree there that Carpenter and Hill were trying to bring to the Halloween film. But I do appreciate the homages both on and off camera in this film.
Now that you kind of mentioned that, I think that Halloween 1978 was kind of made as, and like homage to the horror movies that came before it. And, it really became its own thing. And then, it continues, and they've just been kind of able to add more and more and more. And, one thing that I really liked about H2O is that Janet Leigh, was in it, and she was the administrative assistant for one Carrie Tate.
Yeah, that was a sweet cameo. I really like that scene. I particularly like that Lee kind of gave her that look and a little motherly advice.
Oh, I love that.
Cool. Yeah,
I love that.
That was a really nice nod there. But I'd like to take a minute to talk about the H40 trilogy. I honestly felt like 2018 rebooted the franchise, and I'll tell you why. While in the early pre-production stage, before Green and McBride were brought on to the film, Halloween 2018 was said to be a recalibration of the franchise rather than a reboot or a remake. But after Green and McBride came on, they tossed all of that out and said it would be a direct continuation of the 78 film. However, that is not what we saw, despite their claims in Halloween Kills. They clearly rewrote the ending of the original film, and that's why it's at least a partial reboot.
So, are you referring to the events in Kills here with Deputy Hawkins?
Yes, I am. I take it you have something to say there?
Well, I guess I never saw it as rewriting the end of the very first movie. So, okay, let's go like multiversal theory here since we're kind of on that kick.
Okay.
So, so like in the 78 universe, we continue with the events for Halloween 2 in 1981. But if the multiverse has an infinite amount of possibility, once Michael is shot 6 times and falls off the balcony, another possible timeline would be for him to go with the Deputy Hawkins 78 timeline. Like he just gets up and walks away. So even though the original 78 timeline, you could go with like the 1978 and 1981 as like one movie, and then you get that little bit of switch there from like the 78 to 18, so it just makes it a little different. So that's just kind of where my head kind of went to first. So just wanted to, but I just want to make sure I was kind of on the same page with you there, Mike.
I was calling it a rewrite because they had to change things at the end of the 78 film if Michael was going to have been in Smith's Grove for the last 40 years. He could not have died in Halloween 2 from 1981, and they didn't catch him in the 78 film, so it had to be rewritten to fit their story. Not to mention, in the 78 film, Michael was last at the Doyle's house after having tried and failed to kill Laurie after being shot 6 times by Lewis. In the 2018 film, the last house Michael was at was the Myers house, and he was captured and arrested right outside of it. However, it actually occurs to me just now that with Michael getting up and disappearing at the end of the 78 film, 2018 could be a continuation of that story with Michael going from the Doyle house to the Myers house. And that, I think, fits into your multiverse theory.
But I also kind of get you with the whole kind of rewrite thing, because they did have to kind of make some of those changes there for like 100% how like the 78 film ends, and of course I think we both think of like 78 and 2 from 1981 as kind of the same, like the same film, much as we consider like 18 and Kill. So I totally get it. So I just want to make sure I was on the same page there.
Right. I was looking at it from a franchise perspective as far as where they could go with the story. They couldn't use Halloween 2, and so they added to the end of the 78 film to fit their timeline. But let's talk about how Blumhouse even got a hold of a property as big as Halloween. Jason Blum and his Blumhouse Productions have done many films since the founding of the company back in 2000, and they range in quality from bad to good. Meanwhile, after failing to develop a new Halloween film in time, Dimension Films lost the production rights to a sequel to the film in 2015, and those rights then transferred back to Miramax, which then joined with Blumhouse Productions. In that twist of fate, Blumhouse got its first major horror icon in The Shape. Jason Blum was himself quoted as saying they had never done a film as anticipated as Halloween 2018. Shortly after Miramax joined with Blumhouse Productions in May of 2016, a new installment was officially announced with John Carpenter's involvement as composer, executive producer, and creative consultant. But that creative consultant part came on later. Apparently, John Carpenter did not typically get involved in the sequels of his films and was already doing more than he would normally do with composing. But it was Jason Blum who convinced Carpenter to take a more active role in the making of the film. The story goes that Jason introduced Carpenter to David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, and after hearing and being impressed with their pitch, Carpenter pitched a few of his own story ideas, and that's when he came on as a creative consultant. Carpenter had originally intended that Halloween 2018 would be the final installment of the Halloween franchise with Michael Myers, but both Green and McBride quickly indicated that they actually had a rounded trilogy in mind to wrap things up, and Carpenter agreed that agreed to that as long as he was getting paid for it. I find it funny that he had to stipulate that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, but McBride and Green got their wish as the trilogy was made, and Carpenter was involved in all three films.
Mike, that had to be some meeting there between all three of those people, huh? I know Carpenter doesn't really like to be involved with the franchise at all now, or very little. But for him to come on as that creative consultant and do what he did with this H40 timelines is really impressive. And talking about Blumhouse, I'm really glad they got a hold of the property for the Halloween franchise. They've done some really fun movies that I've enjoyed, and they're just really good in my mind. I mean, sure, there were some others that are like, we could have probably done without that, but you know what? It's okay. But I think getting a property like Halloween was something that Blumhouse was preparing for all along. And I think that overall they did it right.
They really did do a good job. Halloween Ends excluded. Plus, Blumhouse really scored picking up those rights. Finally getting a big franchise name under their banner has really improved things for Blumhouse. I have heard Jason Blum say that with Blumhouse, his strategy, at least originally, was just to throw a bunch of films at the wall and see what sticks. And some of them certainly did stick more than others. Some of my favorites have been Paranormal Activity, Insidious, Dark Skies, Sinister, Split, and Glass. There were also bombs in there before and after Halloween, in my opinion, like Rob Zombie's Lords of Salem from 2012. God, that movie sucked. And 2019's Black Christmas and 2020's Fantasy Island, just to name a few. But with Halloween, I feel like Blumhouse stepped into the major league. As for their Halloween films, Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills are not only my favorite films in the franchise, they are pretty high on the list of my favorite overall, just my favorite horror films of all time. Unfortunately, I did not feel the same about Halloween Ends. In fact, I would rank Halloween Ends with Halloween Resurrection. And if anybody who's talked to me, I hate Halloween Resurrections. But those first two films are amazing. Halloween 2018 went on to become the highest grossing film in the Halloween franchise in just its opening weekend. But it also set some other records. Check this out, at least as far as 2018 goes. Halloween 2018 was the biggest horror opening with a female lead, the biggest movie opening with a female lead over 55, and last but not least, it was the second biggest horror movie opening ever after It from 2017.
Wow. I mean, that's impressive. I didn't know about those numbers per se, but that's really fantastic. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Ends soon enough, because I've got kind of a new hot take about that movie too, which we can kind of save for another discussion. But Mike, on the last show, we talked about how long the original 1978 movie took to film. How long did 18 take?
Filming for 2018 lasted 28 days, a full 8 days longer than it took to film the original Halloween. It also took place in South Carolina and not in Southern California like the original. David Gordon Green said that the original 2018 film was 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and they had to cut the fat of the film, and entire scenes were cut for both pacing and to get the length down to 1 hour and 49 minutes. And that honestly explains why there are 26 minutes of deleted scenes in the extras that came with the film. Honestly, though, the only scene I felt should have been left in, at least in part, was a scene called Cameron and Cops Don't Mix. In that scene, before Cameron makes an ass out of himself with the cops, Allison and him were actually in the process of making up. And I personally feel like we needed to see that initial attempt to accept when Cameron just shows up at the hospital later and they basically forget their argument in light of what's happening with Michael Myers. Without this initial attempt to mend things, that scene at the hospital feels like it just kind of hand waves everything away and takes away from the story arc they were building between the characters.
Well, I want to kind of throw in a little like book reference here just a bit when it comes to one Cameron Elam, because he's definitely an interesting character to me, especially in 2018, and it evolves some more and kills. Like in the movie, we hear Lonnie mentioned as being the one who Ray is buying peyote from, but really nothing much else is mentioned. But in the book, apparently, Cameron and his family, for the 2018 novel, Cameron and his family live kind of like on a compound, and the cops had a lot of run-ins with the Elam family. Well, when Cameron and Allison are kind of fighting about that kiss from the other girl, they go outside on the football field and they're talking about it, and they're kind of having the kind of makeup scene that you kind of referred to. The cops show up and things just get kind of out of hand, and Cameron gets arrested and goes to jail. So, I mean, this might have been one of the cut scenes because it might have kind of messed up kills a bit. But, this was also originally supposed to, it was also kind of designed as like a standalone movie. So, I mean, it would work if that was put in there. But, overall, since they went like the sequel route, I'm really glad they kind of took that out.
Just as a quick comment before I respond to that.
Yep.
You mentioned that Lonnie, of course, tells them that Ray says that he was buying peyote from Lonnie. But you'll notice that in Halloween Kills, when Lonnie is talking to Cameron and Allison, he says that it was actually him that was buying peyote from Ray.
I was really hoping that you were going to pick up on that because I really just love the friendship between Ray and Lonnie. It definitely wasn't as close, I would say, as like Lonnie and Tommy kind of in Kills, but it really feels like in 18, like they were just like two old buddies that just like used to do drugs together, and they don't really talk a lot anymore, but they still consider themselves friends, like kind of that kind of thing. It's kind of how their relationship felt.
Right. My guess is the truth probably lies somewhere in here. Lonnie probably sold peyote to Ray, and Ray at some point probably sold peyote to Lonnie. So they're probably both not lying.
Yeah.
But what you said there about what happened in the novel there is interesting, and it actually explains why the cops were treating Cameron that way and were calling him out for being an Elam. That actually makes a whole lot of sense. It also explains Cameron's attitude towards the cops. I guess if I had to guess, I would say he picked up some of that attitude from his father, Lonnie.
I'm sure about that because they kind of talk in the book that like there's like Lonnie with a bunch of kids. It's like some kind of like compound, and it's like not really sure like who like Cameron's mother is. And then the cops would show up from time to time, and like the kids would be like on the roof of the house, like throwing like canned goods at the cops. And Cameron even said in the book to one of the cops, yeah, when I was 12, I made you look like a bitch in front of your friends.
Oh,
So
shit.
definitely, not a lot of love between the Haddonfield Police Department and the Elam family in the 2018 film. Um,
Damn.
Things do get a little switched in kills, which we'll kind of talk about with the family, but like it definitely kind of would explain some things with that cut scene. Why there's not a lot of love between the Elams and the cops there.
Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, Mike. You know what? Let's go ahead and talk about some fun references in 18. Because I think we have a lot to discuss here.
Oh, sure thing, James. There are dozens of references to all the other films in the franchise inside Halloween 18. Now, I like to bring the info and hopefully some entertainment along with it. But trust me when I say you do not want to hear me go over every single nod and reference in this movie. Suffice it to say that many elements, lines, kills, and even things like credits either mirror, nod, or homage things in the 10 previous films in the franchise. This was something that Danny McBride wanted to be sure to do. And honestly, it's one of the things I think is so appealing to old fans of the franchise while still being equally welcoming to new fans.
This is, I think part of what makes the 2018 film special among the franchise itself and for the fans of it. They kind of give these little nods to the longtime fans, but it wasn't exactly over the top. Like, if you just decided to start the franchise with the 2018 film, you could easily keep up with what was going on. Enough was explained and retconned that you could literally just jump in as a new viewer. But, you were going to be able to get that little extra bit for being a longtime fan. It's kind of like they paid their fans interest on their fandom with the 2018 film.
Well said, my friend. I like that paying interest on the fandom thing. That's cool. 2018 is a lot like the Dread film from 2012 in that respect. There's a lot of stuff in both films for the longtime fans, while being self-contained enough that anyone can really jump on and enjoy the film without having to go back and read a bunch of comics or watch a bunch of movies. And that's absolutely a huge part of its appeal. It was certainly something that drew me in personally. Let's talk about some of my favorites from among the plethora of homages and nods through, or rather, fandom interest payments, as you say.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go.
All right. Like Carpenter did with the original Halloween and The Thing from Another World from 1951, Green slipped in old footage from TV shows called Voyagers from 1982 and the movie Repo Man from 1984. I thought this part was interesting. The dollhouse at Laurie Strode's house is almost exactly like the house that Michael Myers grew up in, except it's blue and not white. And I have to wonder if this was not just a nod to the original Halloween, but also to A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, where Christian Parker was making a house out of popsicle sticks, just like the one Nancy Thompson grew up in, but it was green and not white.
You know what I think is really neat about the dollhouse? Like, I hadn't picked up on that Nightmare on Elm Street 3 idea. But I think, it's definitely a nod to the original Myers house. But when you factor in kills, that's a bit of foreshadowing, I think, that Laurie has kind of kept up with the way the house looks now. Part of her, like, Doomsday Michael preparation.
I actually had not even considered it, but that's a nice catch, and you could be onto something there. But back to my favorite homages in the film. As I am a big fan of Rob Zombie's 2007 remake, I liked that the killing of the gas station attendant, the mechanic, as well as podcaster Aaron and Dana in the filthy bathroom echoes the killing of Joe Grizzly at the truck stop from Zombies film. Granted, Michael was bashing Joe's arm against the stall to relieve him of his knife. And in 2018, Michael is bashing Aaron's head against the stall in the wall. But that is reflective, I believe. So was Michael standing outside Dana's stall, just like Michael did with Joe Grizzly. Although I loved that dropping of the teeth. That was just badass.
That was awesome.
Also, Michael gets his coveralls off of Joe Grizzly at the truck stop, and in a similar fashion, he got his coveralls in 2018 from the mechanic at the gas station. And I'm guessing getting his coveralls from the mechanic was also a nod to the original '78 film, as he got his coveralls from the mechanic there. Something very similar happened with the gas station theme there. Something very similar happened in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, where Loomis arrives at a gas station or eatery to find that Michael has killed a female clerk and the mechanic and taken his clothes. In fact, the gas station in 2018 is an exact replica of the gas station from Halloween 4, down to the icebox outside.
That was certainly like some very nice nods just in kind of that one little part of the film. And, it also kind of gave a little like wink and a nod to that bathroom scene in like Halloween H2O, even though, the mom and the daughter didn't die. It was still just a very like spooky scene. So there's definitely a lot of bathroom instances in the Halloween franchise, and I've really got two ideas about this. Okay. So the first thing is, I think the bathroom is kind of where we're always the most vulnerable, right? You're kind of
literally caught with your pants down.
Exactly. Like you're literally caught with the pants down. And if someone comes in, you're like, okay, this is how I die. Even if it isn't, right? It's just that you feel really vulnerable in that moment. So it really would be a horrible way to die. And that scene was just a nice way there to let us, I guess, kind of safely experience that fear, because that's something that I think everyone can relate to, which I think is just a really cool thing, like, because it really kind of freaks out everyone to kind of die in a bathroom. And another kind of book reference I want to throw in here is when Dana's in that bathroom stall, but before Michael comes in, there's a nice little nod to Halloween 2 of 1981. Do you remember Bud, the paramedic guy, the one that kind of looks like a 70s porn star in that film?
Yep.
So when that other nurse, and I forget her name, like not his like girlfriend, lover, but the other one, and Jimmy's kind of in the break room. He's making a poem about Janet. Amazing Grace, come sit on my face. Don't make me cry. I need your pie. Well, when Dana's in the stall, she sees that same poem. She reads it and thinks how Grace must be like really nice, but that someone lacks the creativity to finish off the poem correctly and changes pie to smile because it sounds better.
That is funny. That actually might have been a cool scene to have, but either way, it's fun to know that it was in the novel there. I also have to comment. I mean, Amazing Grace, come sit on my face. Don't make me cry. I need your pie. If that line ever worked on a woman, I will give you $1 million.
I know, right? I know.
Anyway, last but not least, I have to mention two big nods to the original '78 classic. Dave getting pinned to the wall was clearly a reference to Bob getting pinned to the wall in the '78 film. Watch those scenes back to back sometime. The last one I liked so much was because it was a nod to the more philosophical discussion about Michael being a personification of fate and death made by the teacher and Laurie as she sits in class, and Michael stands across the street staring at her. In 2018, we hear the teacher talking about fate taking a different course, and we see Laurie Strode ominously standing outside Allison's school, watching her, basically switching places with Michael in this mirror scene. I think this was just as telling about Laurie as the classroom scene in the original Halloween is telling about Michael. The basic idea, from what I can tell, is that, like the podcaster Aaron asked, did one monster create another? In other words, has Laurie herself become a monster? This becomes particularly apparent when you consider that Michael turns a good portion of Haddonfield into monsters in Halloween Kills. But it also reflects the change in Laurie in 2018. Specifically, the prey has become the predator, and the hunted, has become the hunter.
Exactly. But here again, I really love the kind of throwbacks and nods to that original film because it also makes it completely new. Another thing here from the novel, Allison was concerned that Laurie was going to commit suicide for giving her $3,000 cash that came from Aaron and Dana. Like for the interview, because she says, that's what people do when they think they're going to kill themselves.
Right.
So the novel just adds that nice little extra tidbit, and I really love that nice little throwback to Bob's death.
Yeah, wow. Damn. I did not know about Allison thinking that Laurie was giving her that money because she was going to kill herself. And you're right, that fully fits suicidal behavior. They often give away possessions when their intent is to kill themselves.
Exactly.
That certainly explains why Allison didn't want to take the money, and it paints that whole scene in a totally different light. Here's something I didn't pick up on right away. When Allison is walking with Dave and Vicky to school, her friend Vicky says that her family should just put up Christmas tree on Halloween and forget all that other crap. Anyway, the suggestion from Vicky was not addressed, but did you notice that when Laurie and the police come to Karen's house to take her and Allison to safety, Karen is wearing a Christmas sweater? Also, they don't show it in the film, but when Dave shows up at the kid's house later where Vicky is babysitting and he shows her the tattoo, well, I guess you don't actually know it's a tattoo in the movie. They just show his arm to her or whatever, but he does get a tattoo there on his arm, and the tattoo was of the date October 31st, 2018. And fun fact, Allison mentions in the film that Halloween was on a school night, and in fact, Halloween in 2018 did actually fall on a Wednesday, a school night.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, okay, I'm going to bring in the novel just a little bit more here because, I'm kind of obsessed with getting like every little detail out of these films.
Hell yeah, me too, my friend.
So let's talk about this Christmas tree idea. In the book, Dave actually mentions that, and we see like Karen has the kind of sweater on in the movie, and that was actually a choice that was talked about in the novel with Karen. She didn't want Laurie's neurosis and trauma to affect her and continue to cloud her judgment. So instead of kind of celebrating Halloween here like everyone else does, she wants to kind of go ahead and fast forward to get into that Christmas festive spirit. So they don't give out candy, nor do they put up any kind of like Halloween decorations or anything like that. They are those people that just turns off the lights and pretends that they're not home, and she goes ahead and starts preparing for Christmas.
That does add a lot of flavor to that. It also explains why Allison just kind of blows off Vicky saying that. Man, I love how much these novels really add flavor to the film. But I believe there was something conspicuous about Dave you wanted to talk about.
Okay, so sure. So let's talk about that tattoo that Dave got here for Bennett here. So one of the cutscenes of the film, because I literally just went back and watch this. There is a part in which Vicky tells Allison that she's got to babysit, and all that. And all that's actually in the book. And in that scene and in the book, Dave kind of makes a quip of like, hey, maybe we should get matching tattoos. So that's kind of the first part where we kind of see the tattoo thing. So then after Dave's death scene, Deputy Hawkins is the one that discovers the body. So in the novel, Hawkins wonders if that tattoo on his arm was somehow foreshadowing his death. Little did Hawkins know that this was supposed to be Dave's first time with Vicky, but let's just say Michael and Julian kind of interrupted that romantic moment.
It was his first time. We know for a fact on Halloween, it only takes 1 minute and 26 seconds to have sex. He could have waited just a minute to let the guy get some. I mean, come on.
Exactly, right? Just 1 minute, 26 seconds. That's all it takes.
So that actually makes a lot of sense. That's why Vicky says you are so getting dry hump tonight when she sees it.
And one more little callback when it comes to Dave. When Dave comes over to see Vicky and is dressed up in the overalls with the stick horse, the horse's name is Tate, a little throwback to Carrie Tate / Laurie Strode in H2O.
I did not catch that, actually. Good eye there, my friend. So I have to comment on a couple of things that I have noted in Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. The first is the character Lance Tivoli. We see him in the opening scene of 2018 with a white umbrella, and when Michael starts getting agitated and the other parents start freaking out, one of them says Figaro, a reference to the aria Largo El Factotum by Gioacchino Rossini. It's been used 1 million times before, even in Looney Tunes cartoons, and you've definitely heard the song, even if you don't recognize it by name. I only bring it up because in Halloween Kills, you see this same combination again associated with Lance Tivoli's character. In HK, Tivoli was in the car and Tommy Doyle was threatening him with the bat, and Largo El Factotum was playing on the radio. But this time we notice Vanessa character. She randomly opens up the white umbrella. They don't explain that at all. Well, Michael Myers was not at the second scene in HK. Nobody knew that, but the viewers. So I have to wonder if these things, the white umbrella and the Largo El Factotum song, are tied to both Michael Myers and Lance Tivoli somehow. But I can't put my finger on the connection.
So Tivoli really is like this fascinating character to me in the movies, and the novels actually fleshes out his character a bit more. So he really loved opera music, and it kind of helped him focus according to that novel. Because there's actually one part in the novel to where he thinks that police officers can actually read your mind. So if he gets approached by a police officer, he starts kind of thinking of the notes and the lyrics for different opera songs that are so complex that a police officer wouldn't be able to actually read his true thoughts. So that's just that's one little tidbit there. And so let's talk about that white umbrella for a moment. Yeah. So in the novelization of Kills, Tivoli loves the umbrella that he has at Smith's Grove. It's like his favorite possession that he has, but he's not allowed to take it on the bus. So the one that Vanessa opens up and kills is one that he actually steals while he's in Haddonfield. But he generally believed that the universe was watching out for him because no one chased after him when he stole it. And another interesting thing about him being in the car and Kills, after he gets the umbrella, he realizes that he's really hungry and that he hadn't really eaten in a while. So he ends up coming around like a pizza delivery car, and the delivery driver leaves his car unlocked. So he takes out 2 pizzas and winds up at Mick's bar. So he figures, okay, well, if the delivery driver was kind of too stupid to lock his car, maybe someone else also left their car unlocked here. And lo and behold, he finds one, which is like Vanessa's and Marcus's car. So he gets in just to kind of eat his pizza and kind of like take a load off. But he ends up eating so much, he ends up falling asleep. So one more thing I want to point out about Tivoli here is that in that kind of opening scene of Halloween 18, Aaron is told by Dr. Sartain that he should tie his left shoelace because Mr. Tivoli has a fixation on such things. And Tivoli really does, according to the Kills novel. So in the novel, as a kid, he's abused by his mother and father, and they use rope to punish him. So anything that's similar to rope scares him, and his response is to turn violent. So one thing to mention about in the car scene, Vanessa has pigtails and has her hair tied up in ribbons. So that ends up scaring Tivoli as well as him being asleep, and he's kind of getting woken up. But he's actually really proud of himself for not hurting Vanessa because he does have that fixation with anything that looks like rope.
Wow. See, this is one of the things I love about doing a horror podcast with you, my friend. You really bring it with reading these novelizations. I mean, damn, that is some great inside information about Tivoli there that I've actually been curious about for years. I always wondered why he was in Smith's Grove and why he would have been out on the yard or even on the same bus with the likes of Michael Myers. And that thing about the music and the umbrella has been eating at me since 2019. And you finally answered that question for me. You get the Inside Award for this one, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. And honestly, it wasn't until like with that kind of Halloween 18 novel that I didn't even realize that these films had like a novelization to go with them. I just kind of randomly found it on either Twitter or Amazon, I'm sure. But they do really kind of add just that little extra spice to the movie. And like it doesn't really detract from it. It's kind of like you're cooking some kind of food. So like sometimes, you're just eating and you're like, wow, this is really good. But if I just add in this one little bit of spice, it's just going to kind of kick it up a notch and make it better. And that's kind of how I feel like these books do for me.
Oh, nicely put. That is definitely what the novels add to the story. That perfect seasoning to make it just right. I like that. If I could talk about one of my favorite bits in the movie for a minute. You know how the podcaster Aaron holds up the mask to Michael at Smith's Grove and does everything he can do to try and get Michael to speak to him. Well, Michael definitely does answer him, and apparently only the other patients can hear him as they all start freaking right the hell out. But it would seem that they could hear him. They could not hear him either. What's more is later on in the bathroom when Michael kills Aaron and Dana, I honestly think that is Michael's version of them old "Can You Hear Me Now" commercials from back in the day, especially if you consider that later on when Dr. Sartain asks Michael to say something, Michael smashes his head, responds by smashing his head like a pumpkin.
Say something, Michael. Say something. Cue the Halloween music, right?
Yep.
And I'd completely forgotten about those old commercials. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me out? But I really think that's certainly what Michael's trying to do. I mean, I'm sure they had TV there at Smith's Grove, and he'd been there for so long, he'd probably seen those too, right? And Aaron wanted some kind of response. And later on in 18, Allison's is able to use that fixation that Dr. Sartain has of trying to get Michael to speak in order to kind of get out of Deputy Hawkins' truck.
Oh yeah, that was some quick thinking, and one of the reasons she is a final girl. But speaking of Dr. Sartain, I heard a theory that I have full on bitten into. But before I tell you the theory, I gotta kind of set the stage. I want to point out a few things about Dr. Sartain to kind of set the mood before I drop the theory on you.
Okay, let's go.
Dr. Sartain was obsessed with Michael Myers, and even Laurie Strode for that matter. Dr. Sartain was even a student of Loomis for years as they studied him and up until Loomis's death. Dr. Sartain claims to have thoroughly studied the findings of a whole lot of doctors that have examined and made case studies of Michael over the years. But Dr. Sartain was clearly very jealous of Dr. Loomis, as he says he was the only one who got to see Michael Myers in the wild. He talks about how he has never seen him in an uncontrolled environment and how he has tried many times to get Michael to speak to him. Then ends that by saying that tonight, however, there are so many possibilities. There is no worry about what Michael will do in Dr. Sartain. He is acting like a man who set this up. You'll note that his pen has a little skull and spine on it as a clip, which just screams Ed Gein to me. The theory is that Dr. Sartain intentionally went on the transfer bus to help him escape in order to see him in the wild, to know what pleasures he gets from killing. I submit that it might have even been Sartain's attempt to help Michael escape that crashed the bus, that might even imply that it was one of the guards who shot Dr. Sartain for trying to free Michael.
I'd never heard of that theory, but you think he had to help, right? I mean, that's even when he tells the guard kind of getting on the bus there. Michael is my patient until he's handed over. So I've got to see my duty through to the end. So when we did the 78 movie last month, we kind of learned from the novel that Michael had his little empire at Smith's Groves. So, Michael had to manipulate Mr. Rip Van Winkle there, right? Sorry. I did have to throw in a little Sheriff Barker quote into this, and that just seemed like the perfect place to put it.
You're all good, my friend. Great quote. In both 2018 and HK, Laurie's daughter Karen is ironically a bit of a Karen in the film. She was obnoxious and entitled, with a penchant for complaining to those in authority about how they should be doing their jobs in order to police things around her. She is clearly micromanaging her whole family, and she's willing to lie and manipulate her own family into seeing things her way. She has a very narrow view of her mother, Laurie, and won't even let others see her in any other way. Like that scene where Laurie has just come from watching Michael get hauled away on the transfer bus, and then meets up with Karen and her family at the restaurant. Laurie says, "I saw him, the shape," which was an awesome nod to fans, by the way, because he had never actually been referred to as the shape before.
Yes.
So that was pretty cool. But I mean, Laurie is clearly stressed out. I mean, you saw her in the truck with that gun, sitting there waiting and watching, and how she screamed into the night or whatever after dealing. She was stressed out, And so she comes in and she takes a drink of wine. Granted, it was a decent sized drink, but she was just trying to calm herself down. She had a similarly large drink of wine in H2O to calm herself in the face of Michael's inevitable return. Anyway. True. Karen sees her mom do this and immediately attacks her with, "This is why we don't reach out," and makes a huge deal out of it. And then, as if she's being ever so generous and graceful about the scene she just made, is apparently blaming on her mother, she has the nerve to say, "Well, why don't we just start over?" As if she wasn't the one to start all of that crap.
You can certainly tell that Karen has a lot of hate or unresolved trauma towards Laurie with the way she was raised. But I think that her saying, why don't we start over, is a way to help her say, okay, let's try to restart this night and let's try to restart our relationship. And I think that's where we start seeing, like, that's kind of the moment where we start seeing Karen kind of becomes later on in 18 and then kills. And, just one little note, because you mentioned it. The gun that Laurie has in her truck looks very similar to the gun that she had under her pillow in Halloween H2O.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Just like something that just literally popped into my mind this moment. So, I'm kind of helping get us back on track here. But so Karen, like, is a Karen in this film, and then she also has those Karen moments in Kills. But I don't know, since these films are really about trauma, it really feels like it's a way to kind of help her restart.
That's certainly possible, and it would seem to fit. But if I could just say one last thing before we move on, I can't help but notice that even when her mom was proven right, even when her upbringing saved her life, there was no acknowledgement on her part or forgiveness. But there was definitely a change in her, as you said. So that is something. But I believe you had some stuff from the novel you wanted to talk about, didn't you, James?
Okay, yeah, just a couple, just little things that just kind of bring that extra spice here for the movies. And some things are just completely different by the time we get to Kills, which, I know we're going to talk about Kills here in just a moment. Okay, so first of all, Allison is a runner. She's like an early morning person, like early bird gets the worm, so she always gets up to go for a jog. That first run, the first run that we see her in the novel, she's barked at by a highly reactive dog that is in her neighborhood, and it kind of spooks her. Well, next morning, that dog has been killed and hung like it's being drained of blood from a nearby tree, which is another throwback to Halloween with killing Lester, the German Shepherd.
Interesting. There was a cut scene from Halloween 2018 called Jog to a Hanging Dog. Well, that was right on cue. Where Allison is out jogging and she comes across neighbors who are trying to get a dead dog down from a tree that is hanging upside down by a rope. Allison looks genuinely disturbed by this, and as she turns to go, the camera looks down the street, and we see who I think was Michael, still in his hospital gown, watching Allison from afar, which I think suggests that Michael killed the dog. It seems like the novel points in that direction as well. Before you get to your next thing from the novel, though, can you tell me if that's the impression you got from the book at all? That Michael killed the dog because it scared Allison?
Actually, I didn't, with the way like the book went, because if the dog scared Allison the day before he got out of Smith's Grove, that would be kind of difficult for him to know. But then again, for God's sake, he can't drive a car. Sorry, nice little 78 reference there. So I mean, if it's something like that, it's always possible that the dog barking at Michael, so Michael yet silenced another pooch who couldn't help but keep their mouth shut about where he was.
That certainly works too, and actually, it's more in line with Michael's character. But I believe you had something you wanted to talk about concerning good old Sheriff Barker.
I did mention the cowboy hat wearing Sheriff Barker. So when Hawkins and Barker are talking about Michael Myers when they're in the ER with Dr. Sartain, and so Dr. Sartain is out, and we get him referred to as Mr. Rip Van Winkle, Hawkins mentioned that maybe it's fate or karma for Michael to be returning to Haddonfield 40 years to this day, from when he was originally stalking babysitters in Haddonfield. They don't get too deep in that philosophical debate, but it is mentioned. And when Hawkins is driving around with Dr. Sartain in the novel, they talk about the Myers house and what became of it. So this is where the novel is a little different from the way the movie plans out. Hawkins actually mentions that the Myers house had become some sort of shrine for serial killer groupies, and that he became part of a local group that tore down the house and turned it into a community garden. So from something tragic to something beautiful.
I could certainly see why some of that was left out. I mean, obviously they couldn't have had the Myers house destroyed and turned into a garden that night. The Myers house was kind of central to the story there. But that information does make me wonder about Big John and Little John. Actually, they knew the details of Judith Myers' murder and used that knowledge to try to scare those kids back. Um, what what if Big John and Little John were serial killer groupies, and that is why they bought the house, knowing its history? I think it's also why Little John's words to Michael were, "Michael, you come home." I always thought that was a little weird for him to say, but I mean, if they are actually these serial killer groupies, that actually kind of explains it. What do you think of that?
Either the Johns are like serial killer groupies or really into like horror stories like we are, which I'm sure like we'll touch on a bit more about the Johns here in just a minute when we talk about kills. Now, just before we get to those kills, I want to mention my favorite scene in the entire movie, and it actually comes from Ray. So, okay, I think Ray is the best father figure in the entire Halloween franchise and just generally just a nice guy. And it comes across that way in the book as well. I mean, even in the book, when the situation is going on that restaurant, they're all kind of trying to go home. Ray walks Laurie to her truck and asks if she's okay to drive. Like, he doesn't really like Laurie a lot, but he genuinely cares about her safety. So I really think he's just a great dad in this movie. So my favorite scene in the movie is early on. It's Ray when he's getting those mouse traps set and it snaps. And he's like, "Oh man, I got peanut butter on my penis," which is definitely a dad thing to say.
That is my favorite moment with Ray too. When I first saw 2018, I was rolling when he said that. you are totally right. That is a very dad thing to say, and I also loved Allison's disgusted reaction to it. That was definitely a daughter response.
Ooh, dad.
Yeah,
it's great.
So we have actually reached one of my favorite parts of the podcast, where despite our countless corpses named, we definitely count the bodies. In Halloween 2018, the first kill while off camera is the bus driver. The second kill was Haskell, a guard from Smiths Grove Sanitarium. He was killed on the bus by Michael, but again off camera. But his body is seen by Officer Hawkins when he arrives on the scene. Haskell was killed along with another guard named Kuhnman. Both were killed by a head wound. The next kill was Kevin's father in the truck. His neck was broken by Michael. So we're up to 4 kills already, and none of them have been on camera. However, we do get to see Kevin himself get killed in the truck as well. And like father, like son, his neck was broken. In the 6th kill was the mechanic who we saw beaten to death in the garage at the gas station. The clerk at the gas station was killed as well, but we only get to see the aftermath of the kill with his jaw ripped open, like Michael curb stomped him on the counter and busted his teeth out in the process. Number 8 was the podcaster Aaron, who had his head bashed against the wall in the stall when he came to protect Dana, who had her neck broken after being strangled right afterwards. The 10th kill was another off-camera one, but we certainly heard it when Michael bludgeoned Gina Pancella to death with the hammer before trading it for the knife on the counter. I mean, there was a definite thud, and she clearly fell over in the chair there.
Yes.
The next one was Andrea Wagner, who was stabbed through the throat with the knife that Michael just got. That was one of those quick, efficient kills. He smacks her head against the window, knife through the throat, and just walks on. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes, the 12th death was the babysitter Vicky, and she was slashed across the shoulder and stabbed twice in the back. The next one to go was her boyfriend Dave, who was impaled through the back of the neck with a kitchen knife. That one was off camera. Oscar Bellucci was the next to go. He was stabbed in the back and then impaled through the throat and mouth to hang on the top of the gate spike. Then, of course, Dr. Sartain had his head stomped like flat like a melon. Officer Richard had his throat cut and was stabbed in the head with a penknife off camera, and that puts the count up to 16. Now we are actually up to my favorite kill in the whole movie, and that was an off-camera kill. Of course, I'm talking about the decapitated Officer Francis, who had his head carved out like a jack-o'-lantern, and Michael put a flashlight up his throat to light up his head. The final kill in number 18 was Ray Nelson, who was strangled by a chain. I did not think it was an accident that 18 people died in Halloween 2018. Just say
it. 18 kills for Halloween 18 was just perfect. And Halloween 18 really does have, I really think, some of the best kills in the entire franchise. The two that live rent-free for me in my head is Dana in the bathroom. We've been over this. She's just terrified, and you really feel that with her in this movie. And the actress who played her did such an amazing job. And I mean, you can just feel her fear in that scene. And the other is a babysitter, Vicky. I mean, those damn socks she's wearing. I mean, that's ultimately what does her in, right? As a kid, I used to wear those kind of fuzzy socks around, and I busted my ass so many times thanks to those before they put the little rubber stuff on the bottom. Right. And so nowadays I wear the ones that got like the little grippers or like the bucklucks that kind of have like the little shoe style thing on. I'm like, come on, Vicky, you knew those had to be bad. But that's yet another kind of horror movie trope about something kind of stupid that ultimately gets you killed. But anyway, the actress that played Vicky really brought a lot of energy to that scene. And I also love how Julian just kind of noped out of there like, hey, sorry, girl, you're on your own.
I gotta say the one scene where I jumped watching 2018 originally is when Vicky opens that closet and Michael just steps out of it. That made me jump when I first saw that.
Gosh. It's it's coming somewhere, but just the way that happens, just incredible.
Right. And actually, the bit with Julian just noping out of that was actually pretty funny. And Julian just goes booking it out of the house. At least he came back once to check on her.
Exactly. And I also love in Kills how Marcus kind of sees him on TV and he says, hey, that's Julian, that little asshole kid that lives across the street.
Yeah.
So
honestly though, I mean, if you think about it, what was the little guy gonna do besides go get help? I mean, even if it was too late, I mean, he was not gonna stand up against Michael Myers.
Oh no. Okay, so parents, if you're concerned about this, he did the right thing, right? He's like, I want to go get help. It's too late, but I'm going to go get help.
Right. That was something. I mean, he could have just ran down the street, but at least he went to go get someone. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's something.
Exactly. Yeah. So he went to get Dave.
Right. I like how he wanted to send Dave up the stairs first.
Yes.
He's like, send Dave up there first.
Poor Dave got no respect at all in this movie, none at all.
So let's get into the second part of Halloween Night in 2018. Halloween Kills came out in 2021, a full 3 years after 2018 film. My understanding is that they wanted to test the waters with the 2018 film before they were willing to do the following films. Halloween Kills, like 2018, was directed by David Gordon Green and written by Green, Danny Bride, and Scott Teems. It's actually the 12th film in the franchise, and for that reason, 12 pumpkins were used in the opening sequence. Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, comes back as Laurie Strode, as do Judy Greer as Karen and Andy Matichak as Allison. Dylan Arnold returns as Cameron Elam. Will Patton reprises his role as Deputy Frank Hawkins, and Thomas Mann comes on to play young Frank Hawkins in the flashback scenes. James Jude Courtney comes back again to play the Shape, but we do get some new faces in the trilogy as well, in the form of Anthony Michael Hall as Tommy Doyle. We also got some familiar faces with Charles Cyphers as Sheriff Lee Brackett, Kyle Richards as Lindy Wallace, and Nancy Stevens as Marion Chambers, all three from the original Halloween back in 1978. The film is a sequel to 2018's Halloween and the 12th film in the Halloween franchise.
I think it was kind of good for them to kind of test the waters with 2018 because, there'd been some previous issues with like some of the Halloween movies like not being exactly popular, with like Resurrection, and then of course you have zombies like Halloween 2, and then you had Dimension that lost the rights in 2015. They just wanted to make sure the movie was good. So I really liked how badass Laurie Strode in this, and they did a great job with that movie. And Kills, it's like the perfect sequel, and it really is that kind of same movie. But 18, I think, could have very easily ended the story just with the way it ended, but I'm really glad it got to continue with the sequels and letting Green kind of tell his entire story that he wanted to tell.
I can certainly agree that Halloween Kills needed to happen after 2018. Together, they make one of my favorite movies. But I've already mentioned that I did not like Halloween Ends, and in my mind, Halloween Kills is where it ended. Who says you got to kill the boogeyman?
The first time that I watched Ends, truth be told, I didn't like it the first time. But, I kind of let it percolate for a bit, and I rewatched it. And now I've actually come to the other side where I really like it. And I think it's a really strong movie. And because I think, I guess at first I was expecting something different. But after what I thought about, what they were doing with it, I really ended up liking it. While, it didn't really change like the horror movie genre, I kind of agree with like Stephen King here that it was very character driven and has a good story with it. And I'm actually in the process of reading the novel like right now, and it does add a few little extra details to it, which I think kind of fleshes out the film.
But in the meantime, I have some trivia for you. Producer Ryan Freeman lobbied for Danielle Harris' cameo in Halloween Kills, but it was vetoed. She is very linked to the franchise, having played Laurie Strode's daughter and Michael Myers' niece, Jamie Lloyd, in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers from 1988, Halloween 5 from Revenge of Michael Myers from 1989, as well as playing Annie Brackett in both of Rob Zombie's Halloween films. I know that a lot of fans wanted to see her, but Jamie was written out of the story when Karen became Laurie's daughter, and we don't need an Annie Brackett in the new trilogy because she already died back in 1978. So even if she came onto the film, it would be as a totally different character, but it would still be cool to see her. I really liked seeing her in the Rob Zombie movies.
Yeah, it's like it was really kind of nice to kind of have her back, in some kind of capacity in the zombie films. And I think that really kind of lends credence to that kind of multiverse idea, because she played, a different character in that one. And, as I mentioned, I really like to see them kind of do a sequel series for that, the kind of Thorn timeline, to be honest, because I'd really like to see Danielle Harris come back in some way.
I liked your idea you mentioned earlier about seeing her character after she carried Michael's curse for 40 years. That would be cool. But let's get into the making of stuff for Halloween Kills.
All right, let's
Jamie
go.
Lee Curtis, Kyle Richards, Charles Cyphers, Nancy Stevens, and Nick Castle all reprise their roles from the original 78 film in Halloween Kills. It is actually tied with Halloween 2 from 1981 for the most castmates brought back together that doesn't include reused scenes or photos. It should be noted that the scene where Nick Castle actually wears the mask was cut from the film. So technically he's not in the movie. The scene was from when drones come into the bathroom, when we see Michael's face, and we see Michael's face in the reflection. When the old guy in the cemetery. That was the scene where he shows up there. When it goes into the room, we see Michael's face in the reflection. But then, of course, that was cut out, of course. However, Nick Castle does still do the ADR breathing for Michael Myers. Nick Castle was 72 years old in 2019 when Halloween Kills was being filmed, making him the oldest actor to ever play Myers. George P. Wilbur, who played Michael in Halloween 4 and Halloween 6, is now 81 years old, and he is the oldest living person to have played Michael Myers twice.
Wow.
The reason that the characters of Tommy Doyle and Lonnie Elam were recast in Halloween Kills when many others were not is because Brian Andrew, who played Tommy in 1978, retired from acting in 2015, and Brent LePage has never acted again since playing Lonnie Elam in the original film. Now, on the subject of Tommy Doyle, some of you are probably wondering why Paul Rudd didn't reprise his role as Tommy from The Curse of Michael Myers in 1995. Well, Maleka Codd said at a press conference that it would have been wonderful for Rudd to reprise his role in Halloween Kills, and added that it would have warmed his heart. And there is definitely some disappointment there. But ultimately, Codd felt that Anthony Michael Hall played Tommy in a way that would have been less jarring for the narrative, and thereby take the audience out of the movie. He went on to say that because Paul Rudd is big for comedies and whatever he's in, he's a fantastic actor. But Akkad turned out the way that it did for a reason, and he's very happy with Hall's performance. However, it should be noted that I also read that Paul Rudd was in fact offered the role, but had turned it down because he was busy on Ghostbusters Afterlife. I'm not sure which is true, to be honest. If you guys know the verified truth on the matter, then I would love to hear it in the comments.
Yeah, I've heard both of those, but I think after everything that Paul Rudd has done since Curse of Michael Myers, it would have been a little odd to see him return to play Tommy in this particular story. Anthony Michael Hall really played the crazy, traumatized, tough, like son of a bitch Tommy, and really did a wonderful job. And, that whole thing about Ghostbusters Afterlife, I know he's kind of working on that at the time. And, that's still a movie I've not watched yet. I got on some kind of voodoo sale and figured I'd get around to it eventually. But, I still haven't yet. But, I also thought that Robert Longstreet did just a phenomenal job as Lonnie Elam, though. He looks enough like a grown-up Lonnie and kind of brought, a levity to that character that I think that Lonnie kind of brought in the movie. And, it's interesting because in the novel for Halloween Kills, Lonnie was a writer and wrote the book on Michael Myers. And it's funny because in the book, he was able to interview Dr. Loomis at one point in time, and they joked about Loomis saying, "Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there." And it just really made me laugh when I kind of got to read that book.
That would be a fun memory between them for sure. Also, that thing about Lonnie writing the book on Michael Myers is another thing that makes a whole lot more sense now. I couldn't figure out why Lonnie Elam was suddenly an expert on Michael Myers and knew exactly where he was going in the film. But if he actually wrote the book on he wrote the book on it. That's a phrase for a reason, that makes a whole lot more sense.
And the thing about Lonnie that was really kind of talked about more in the novel for the film is that he really was kind of like, the town freak when it came to Michael Myers and like the paranormal stuff and things like that. And lately I've been able to go on a couple ghost tours of a former utopian society that's not too far away from me, and like the locals calls the person that kind of runs the group the ghost lady, and she's kind of accepted that and kind of leaned into it. So like when she does these tours, she kind of wears a shirt that says, the ghost lady, or, she has a bag that says that too. So, I mean, I kind of feel that's how Lonnie Elam has kind of become like Haddonfield's like the boogeyman man or the shape man or the psychopath expert. There's something there that he's kind of leaned into.
I think the boogeyman man, I could see someone calling that when they were drunk. Like, aren't you the boogeyman man?
Exactly.
Especially in a small town like Haddonfield, man. It seems like maybe that was something that he and Tommy might have bonded over. I mean, it certainly wasn't bonding over Lonnie bullying him when he was younger. But back to the behind the scenes stuff. Since Michael Myers was blind in one eye after being stabbed in his left eye by Laurie with a coat hanger in 1978, James Jude Courtney, the guy playing the Shape in the new trilogy, wore an eye patch for authenticity. Also, while James Jude Courtney was the primary Michael Myers in the film, there were other times where it was necessary for others to put on the mask as well. For instance, stunt coordinator Iron Armstrong played Michael Myers in the flashback scene to 1978. Plus, Michael Myers needed a stunt double as well, and that was Douglas Tate. Some of you might recognize that name too. Way back in 2003, Douglas Tate played Jason Voorhees in the final scene of Freddy versus Jason, where Jason is coming up out of the water holding Freddy's head. So he's actually played two slasher icons.
Wow. I never made that connection with Douglas Tate. I mean, that's really cool. So I mean, he got to play two like iconic characters, and then we also talked about how Robert Englund kind of worked on set of like the 78 film for a day, and then Tate got to do this one. That's just really cool. All these little like tidbits between all these films, like all these different franchises as well.
Oh, that is really cool, especially with England working on both films too. But let's talk a bit more about trivia. At the beginning of the film, when Michael grabs that fireman's hand from the burnout basement after killing the first fireman, that is a direct callback to one of the original Universal horror monster sequels, Bride of Frankenstein from 1935. In that film, the sequel to Frankenstein from 1931, which also takes place on the same night, the monster grabs the hand of little Maria's mother from the burnt out bottom of the windmill after disposing of her husband.
I knew I'd seen something like that before somewhere, and I've been trying to figure that out for a while now. And I do love how Michael and like in the Halloween franchise, he's kind of like a continuation of those like Universal monster movies from the 1930s. And so I absolutely love how they kind of made that homage in Halloween Kills.
Hell yeah. I always appreciate the respect and love of classics by filmmakers. In the flashback scene from 1978, Myers attacks Deputy McCabe with a rope. And in the original Halloween from 1978, Sheriff Brackett says that a rope, a Halloween mask, and some knives were taken from the hardware store. In the original Halloween, Loomis and Brackett discover a dog in the living room that had recently been partially eaten, but the dog was never actually seen until Halloween Kills, when Hawkins and another deputy come across the half-eaten dog in the Myers house. As Halloween Kills was shot digitally, film grain filters were used in the flashback scenes from 1978, which I just have to say were done very well. It really felt like we were looking back into 1978.
And speaking of those kind of flashback scenes, they really added a nice element to the movie. And the actor that played Dr. Loomis in Kills absolutely did a phenomenal job as well, I think. I read that originally they were going to do like a CGI recreation of Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, but ultimately decided to go with the actor that they did. And honestly, I got to say, it was wonderful. And, something I kind of wanted to ask you about the flashback scenes. In the novel, Hawkins has that encounter with Michael in the alley. Like he shoots him and he just walks away. So when the other police officers show up and Hawkins is stressed, is like, "Where were you? I called for backup 10 minutes ago." And they say, "Easy, rookie." In the novel, right after that, the officers go on to say, "Slow dance in the big city." And I was wondering, have you ever heard that before? Because I haven't.
I have not heard that phrase before, and I'm not even sure what it means in that context. So I can't really help you there.
Okay, so I actually feel a little better about that because Hawkins had never heard of it either. I think it was just kind of some like folksy spin on a way of saying just take a deep breath and collect yourself. And it's definitely kind of a fun way to say it. And Hawkins was able to kind of figure out what he meant by that. And I really need to find like some point to be able to bring that into a day-to-day conversation, I think, at this point. Because for those of you who don't know, I pretty much speak in movie fluent movie and book quotes. So you kind of get used to it. So Mike, let's continue on with some more trivia though before I get us like way off track here.
You know what? I speak fluent movie quotes as well. But I do have some inside info for you on the guy that got to play Samuel Loomis in the film. You are right. They were considering CGI, but one day someone commented on how much Halloween Kills art director Tom Jones Jr. actually looks like Donald Pleasance with a little makeup. So he's a lookalike, and that's how he got the job.
But that's fantastic.
Yeah. But check out this stuff I dug up on the Myers house. The original Michael Myers house that was used in the 78 film is actually still standing in South Pasadena, California, and is currently being used by insurance agency. But it was not used in the film because of a couple of reasons. For one, Halloween Kills was shot in South Carolina, not in California. But even if they had shot it in California, the owner of the house does not enjoy the legacy that the house maintains. In fact, there's even a sign on the front lawn forbidding people to go on the porch and take pictures. If you ask me, the guy seems to lack a sense of reality. I mean, what was he expecting when he bought the famous house? Either way, many fans just ignore the sign, especially on Halloween, when they like to dress up as Michael Myers and take pictures.
It's a guy that owns a house related to William Shatner at all. I mean, come on, man. Like, that's just ridiculous. I mean, hell, in our corporate capitalistic country that we live in, you can even set up, a part there where people could pay like $5 and they come up and take a picture on the porch. And, you call it the Shape Insurance Company or the Strode Insurance Company or something and just have fun with it. I mean, the guy just seems like a real jerk to me. And, if I ever make it out to South Pasadena, that's like the first place I'm going. Go ahead and call the cops if you want to, dude, because one of these days I'm coming. I'm going to take pictures because, okay. And, if I was in like real estate or, was going to move to like California, that would definitely be a place I'd want to purchase myself. Either that or, a supposedly haunted house on top of like an Indian burial ground. I mean, at the very least, you could like Airbnb that house and make a ton of money off of it, I'm sure. I mean, if Big John and Little John had survived the Halloween night of 18 and wanted to move after that, I mean, they would have just probably gone the Airbnb route with that house anyway, because in the book, they were actually a real estate agent, but and they were kind of into like the macabre and the spooky kind of paranormal stuff anyway.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page about that. But I just love your defiance about the whole call the cops, I'm taking a fucking picture anyway.
Exactly. Like just go ahead.
Honestly, by the time the cops show up in Southern California, I'll be long gone. So
yeah. Like I'm gonna be long gone, and you're not gonna find me anyway because I'm gonna change my clothes. You're gonna have no idea.
So, in the theatrical cut of Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, Michael gets a dose of extreme melee revenge from Tommy Doyle, and his scene in Halloween Kills is a callback to that. However, in HK, things do not go as well for Tommy.
And that's true. And, as I said earlier, I really like the Tommy character in Kills. And I think the novel really adds a bit more flavor to his already very extreme character in the movie. So for instance, in the movie, Lonnie tells the folks at Mick's Bar that Tommy is a captivating bird whistler, and that's actually true. So okay, I'm going to kind of take like a winding path here for this because Okay, so over the last few years, like Jamie Lee Curtis has talked about how these movies are really about trauma and so I really think Tommy's character is another way that trauma kind of provides another example of how people kind of deal with that. So back in 78, Tommy, Laurie, and the rest of the survivors would be expected to go right back to school the next day, or, at least a couple of days afterwards, and just continue life as normal. They wouldn't be allowed to really process their trauma. So one day while in school, Tommy is actually having a panic attack and looks outside the window and sees a robin. He thinks that this robin has it good. He knows nothing of the boogeyman or any kind of scary stuff. So he actually goes about teaching himself how to sing like a bird. And he uses that as a way to calm himself down in stressful situations. And another thing that with Tommy in the novel is he actually has a thorn rune on his left wrist, similar to what we see with Michael in Halloween 5.
That is interesting. I'm actually really loving how much the novel made it into the film, or vice versa. But if I could move on, I would like to talk about the same day as theaters release of Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Universal got a lot of backlash over releasing Halloween Kills simultaneously on Peacock and in theaters. This was actually Jason Blum's idea. Blum decided that due to the poor box office performance of Blumhouse's Freaky film in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic, it was the best option to allow viewers to see them at home or in theaters. I have to say that I loved it, and I'm likely never going to go to a theater again. So I was equally excited when I found out they were releasing Halloween Ends the same way.
And I really love that fact that they did theaters and Peacock at the same day, because it's honestly so much easier for me that way. And I was actually just thinking about it the other day. Because just until recently, the last movie that I saw in theaters was Knives Out, and I've actually been to the theater once since then, and I just kind of so happened to wind up there, and I watched Amsterdam, and the people I went with, we were the only ones in the movie, and honestly, I still have no idea really what that movie was about, but I digress. But, I really like the idea of being able to watch movies from home, and not paying $30 to go see it and being around a lot of people and spending another $50 on popcorn. So, there's that too.
Right? I think we are so on the same page as far as the same day as theaters release. I freaking love that. I will also add that the ability to rewatch the film over and over again is pretty sweet as well. But my favorite part has got to be the ability to pause the movie so I can go to the bathroom.
Oh my God, yes. Like, you can go to the bathroom, you can get a drink, you can take the dogs out, all that stuff at any point in time in a movie, and you don't miss anything. Nothing really takes you out of the movie of a theater when you have to go to the bathroom, and it just hits hard. But anyway, I'm getting us off track. Mike, I believe there's another interesting piece of info for us that you have about the opening of Halloween Kills with Laurie.
I do, James. In the beginning of Halloween Kills, we hear Laurie scream, "Let it burn!" to the fire trucks as they pass by. This is actually a reference to a deleted scene from Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers in 1988, where a flashback from Halloween 2 from 1981 shows Dr. Loomis pleading with the paramedics to let him burn after blowing up the operating room, only to be ignored like Laurie was. Also, as a quick side note, actual firefighters from Cannon Air Force Base Fire Department appear in the beginning of the film.
You know what? I really kind of wish they would have left that scene in 1981, because I think it would really kind of help that movie and it would kind of add to it. And, hearing Laurie with her paper cut screaming out like that is just incredible. Let it burn, let it burn. And you know what? Speaking of that scene, and I know we've kind of talked about this before, but the knife in the final scene of 18, and it continues through Kills, I actually have a bit of knowledge about that now. According to the novel, that knife was seen as a, quote, totem of strength. And she wanted to keep it.
Oh, well, that makes more sense than what I was thinking. I was certain that Allison was going full on Jamie Lloyd on us, like the Michael Evil had been passed on to her. She seemed really fascinated with that knife, and she was just gripping onto that and driving away in the truck. But that does make sense if it was like a totem of strength thing. Honestly, that would have been better than the Corey story we got. But that's another topic. The premise of Haddonfield citizens banding together to hunt down Michael Myers is similar to the vigilante mob of rednecks that gathers against him in Halloween 4. Allison and Lindsay are the only survivors of the mob that went after Michael in Halloween Kills.
And just a little small spoiler alert for ends. The town keeps on banding together to fight the boogeyman. And that's one thing I think is just really neat, because I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere, and it's not even the same size it's probably the same size as Haddonfield, maybe a little smaller. But, I'm not originally from here, and I don't really know that many people in my town would band together or not. I feel like if someone had lived there all their life and something like, the boogeyman happened, people might band together, but I don't know. I'm kind of like Marcus, because I'm not from here. I'm kind of on the outside looking in, so it's really kind of hard to tell.
I'm certainly in that boat, and have been most of my life, actually. I bet I've lived in 15 cities or more, from California to Oregon, and I definitely feel like I'd be on the outside looking in if I were in that scenario. I would likely not get involved. But let's get back to the movie. Like Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills had its share of callbacks too. And I mentioned a couple already, but check these out. The 3 trick-or-treaters wearing masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch are actually used to reference Halloween 2 as well, in the scene where they convince Big John and Little John that one of the pieces of candy that the kids had received from them had a razor blade, and it is a reference to when little Gary, Deputy Hunt's son, had a razor razor blade stuck in his mouth and was taken to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital. Speaking of the hospital, the logo for Haddonfield Memorial Hospital in Halloween Kills is taken directly from Halloween 2, which is technically not a part of the current trilogy's canon.
So even if that's not like exactly canon for this movie, I think it does hold up nicely for that part. And, I really like how Green and the rest of the team on this movie just always did these little things that these little small callbacks to other films throughout the rest of the franchise. And, even with some of the opening credits of the movies as well that they did.
Yeah, I really like that too. Easter eggs are awesome for fans and great for rewatches. Here's an interesting bit of trivia. If you only count the original series of films and not Rob Zombie's reboot in 2007, Halloween Kills is actually the first time since 1978 that Tommy Wallace and Lindsay Wallace are in the same movie as Laurie Strode. Another first came in Halloween Kills when the mob confronts Michael on the street and Brackett says that line, "Everyone is entitled to one good scare." That was actually the first time in the entire franchise that Sheriff Brackett actually saw Michael face to face.
And when I heard Sheriff Brackett use that line in Kills, it absolutely just made me cheer the first time. Like I had a feeling of what was going to happen. Because ends had already kind of been announced at that point, but seeing Brackett in that movie and just using that line, it's just incredible.
Yeah, it was a nice nod for sure. And seeing all the old faces in the film was really great for the fans. In regards to Tommy Doyle, as you mentioned earlier, in the Halloween Kills novelization by Tom Waggoner, we find out that Tommy actually has a Cult of Thorn tattoo. He was so obsessed with Michael and all things Halloween that he had to get it. When he's anxious, he often rubs it subconsciously. Waggoner writes, Tommy in some ways, he was the worst of them, including Laurie. Ever since the night that Laurie saved him and Lindsay from Michael, he's had difficulty controlling his anger. He had a hair trigger temper, was quick to take offense at any perceived slight, no matter how mild, and he could be irritable, impatient, and impulsive. He's gotten into a lot of fights in high school and even more after he graduated. He drifted from job to job, unable to hold one for any length of time without blowing his top at someone, usually his boss, and taking a swing at them. He'd gone through a series of relationships, but they never lasted long either. No one wanted to be the partner of someone with such a volatile emotional state. Tommy had been in therapy on and off since his late 20s, and while he'd picked up some psychological tools to help him deal with his anger, it was by no means under control. I will add that Tommy Doyle, in my opinion, is a poser. He inflates his experiences to make himself sound more important. He really had very little to do with things back in 1978. It was all Laurie, which he admits later after he's gotten off stage. He hit Vanessa's car with a bat a couple of times, and it wasn't even Michael in the car, it was Tivoli. Yet later he describes it as having an altercation with Michael and Michael escaping, as if Michael would run away from Tommy. He riles up the town and they kill the wrong guy with this whole evil dies tonight shit. I'll just say it. I don't like Tommy in Halloween Kills.
And if this, I really think this is like your hot take for the film. If we were talking about this on Twitter, you could put one of those chili pepper spicy takes on it because I think I'm going to go the opposite on this one, because I think I really like Tommy Doyle in this movie, even though he's so just psychologically messed up, because people process trauma differently. Laurie created a compound, a prison, a cage, or a trap, depending on how you want to look at it. Lonnie Elam kind of wrote the spooky books about Michael Myers and the paranormal thing. And Tommy, man, he just went the opposite, completely unhinged. And, really, Lonnie and Tommy didn't really have much to do with it at all either. But, especially when you think about how little like mental health was even considered back in 1978, going through the 80s and 90s, seems like no one was really worried about mental health and how to process trauma. And I've seen the video on how Jamie Lee Curtis pronounces trauma, but I certainly think this is a trilogy about how different people process those kind of traumatic events, and Tommy is just like one example of those extremes.
All right, you make a good point. Tommy may be those things that I said, but it is also true that people just process things differently. Honestly, though, I think my hatred of Tommy comes more for his part in Tivoli's death. But speaking of that, I just have to take a minute to talk about Lance Tivoli. Um, we saw him at Smith's Grove Sanitarium, and we know he was on the bus when Michael escaped, but he doesn't show any signs that he is dangerous if he's not triggered. Dr. Sartain mentioned that Tivoli might act up if Aaron doesn't tie his shoe in 2018. Also consider this. The guards were dead on the bus, and there were no doctors around. That will become important in just a minute. But what I get more than anything from Tivoli is fear. He fled the bus because Michael started killing people. He hid in Vanessa's car because he was scared, especially after Tommy hits the car violently with a bat a couple of times. He stole the car to flee in fear, and he was even injured in the process. Now, remember how I said that everyone in authority, any doctors that would have helped Tivoli on the bus were all dead? Well, the next time we see him, he's standing outside a hospital shouting for someone to please help him. But as people have been attacking him, he is too terrified to go inside. He must have felt like he finally found where he could get some help at the hospital, not just for his injuries, but with his meds and getting back into care. But then Tommy, in his stupid evil fights tonight mob, decides without evidence that Tivoli is Michael Myers. And even they are flat out told by Laurie and Karen that he is not Michael. The mob is still just too riled up to care. They want Tivoli's blood, and they are going to rip him to shreds like a school of piranhas. Now, in the last place Tivoli had any hope of getting any help, he is instead thrown into a violent and psychotic mob leaves him the choice of being beaten and ripped to shreds by the mob or jumping to his death, and he chose suicide. That just hurts my heart. And Brackett's words are very appropriate. Now he's turning us into monsters. With all of that madness, I think Laurie's voiceover is very appropriate when she speaks of what is going on. Listen to this. I always thought Michael Myers was flesh and blood, just like you and me. But a mortal man could not have survived what he has lived through. The more he kills, the more he transcends into something else impossible to defeat. Fear. People are afraid. That is the true curse of Michael Myers. You can't defeat it with brute force. It is the essence of evil, the anger that divides us. It is the terror that grows stronger when we try to hide. If they don't stop him tonight, maybe we'll find him tomorrow or next Halloween when the sun sets and someone is alone. You can't close your eyes and pretend it isn't there, because he is.
I think that Tivoli, really is probably the most tragic character in Kills, and I honestly feel sorry for him because I know we've kind of already talked about him kind of in the novel a bit and kind of how his mind works, but after Tivoli crashes Marcus and Vanessa's car, he's wandering around town for a bit and trying to think of where he could go to get help. He's nervous about going to the police for help, and I can't blame him, with the incidents with the car and Tommy, but he honestly feels like a hospital is his safe place. At Smith's Grove, he's felt safe and taken care of, and he honestly just in the novel, he just kept talking about wanting new slippers and a piece of chocolate cake and something for his headache to go away. So he decides to go to the hospital because that's where he knows that he'll be safe. Well, apparently not Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, because, I can definitely see where Tommy would get worked up and no one really knows what Michael looks like a few exceptions out there. But I do think that's where Tommy had a full character arc and where Karen kind of changed a bit too. Karen tries to help Tivoli. To Tivoli, like, there was this nurse that brought him food every morning and was nice to him. And in the novel, he refers to her as Nurse Sunshine. So he ends up referring to Karen as Miss Sunshine because she was being nice and was trying to help him. So it's really because of that fear that Tivoli had and his meds kind of wearing off in the novel. He actually heard his mom and dad say that he should just kill himself and make things easier for everyone.
Oh my God.
So, it's really just this fear of Tivoli and the fear of becoming prey for everyone at the hospital. And, it really just made a bad situation worse. And as Brackett said, they all became monsters. And so it's just this escalating fear. And so it's just really just a horrible end to that. And, I do like how Tommy apologized to Karen, and she said in the movie, no one was innocent that night. But, to Tommy's credit, in the novel, he was actually going to wait around for the police to sort everything out. He was going to wait at the hospital to be taken into custody, and he was going to admit that he was the one that started the mob and was ultimately responsible for Tivoli's death. So I guess it's for me to really see Tommy as like the monster or boogeyman type character because he still has a lot of his humanity left.
That is something to consider. He was willing to admit he was wrong and actively did something to put himself on the right path. There was a bit of redemption there for him after all. I think I might have to see Tommy differently on my next time through the film. I will say there was a definite shift in Karen at that point too. She quit being a Karen and took action with Tommy. So that really worked well for both of their stories. I think I'll have to reconsider my whole stance on the characters, actually. If we could switch gears here for a minute, I would like to talk about some story-related things that I have noticed. So I know that Allison went with Lonnie and Cameron to the Myers house, but a couple things happened to make me think that Allison was in on the plan to trap Michael in the street. Consider that the pitchfork is gone from the front porch when Allison, Cameron, and Lonnie show up and Karen attacks Michael with the pitchfork. That was premeditated. She didn't show up and saw her daughter being attacked and grabbed the pitchfork. She already had it when they showed up. And Allison seems like she was expecting her mom to show up. Also, if Karen was sitting around waiting for Michael to come back to the house to lead him to the other street, then why did she wait until then to come in? Why didn't she attack him or lead him away from the house before they ever got there?
Do you think that Allison was just supposed to hold on until Karen got everything together? Do you think she was a bait, or do you think Karen just figured out where she was going, much the way Lonnie, Cameron, and Allison had figured out where Michael was going?
I personally got the impression that Allison was supposed to keep him at the house until Karen could get there. I'm not sure when they would have come together on this plan, but with the pitchfork being gone when they arrived and Allison acting a bit weird when in the back seat when Lonnie and her and Cameron were going to the Myers house, then you add to that Allison screaming for Karen to do it, stab Michael with the pitchfork. It just feels planned to me. I think something was up there, even if I don't have it nailed down yet.
I do like that idea because it I've always kind of thought of Allison saying do it is more of telling Michael to stab her. But I really kind of like that idea that she was talking to Karen too. And we all know that Cameron kind of destroyed Allison's phone with the cheese dip. So, but that's really just an awesome kind of theory there, Mike. I love it. So I do believe we have a couple more cool things, Mike.
Sure we do. and this is actually pretty cool. Because we're covering 2018 and Halloween Kills, I get to count me some more corpses. Now, the first death in Halloween Kills was not by Michael Myers. In fact, it was done by Sheriff Hawkins when he shot his partner, Pete McCabe, through the neck. And honestly, that whole scene displays some apparently deliberately missed shots by Hawkins, who did not want to kill Michael Myers.
But, we also have to remember that later that night, another deputy said, here's what I'm thinking that happened. McCabe was going for his gun, and he accidentally shot himself. So do we count that as Hawkins? But, of course, Michael was going to kill him. So does Michael get an assist here? Or like, where are we going with this one?
No, that was all Hawkins and his fear of killing somebody's baby, but that assist shit was pretty funny. Can I get assist here? Help me out with my small work. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, then we get the scene with the firefighters, and damn, do a lot of firefighters die. Most with a halogen bar. A total of 11 firefighters were killed in that scene, though only 6 deaths were on camera. Some were bludgeoned or stabbed with the halogen. Others were impaled by it. One firefighter was sliced open with a circular saw, and we don't know how the other 5 were killed. Just so that you know, we are up to 12 bodies at this time.
And in the novel, Michael, or I guess rather the Shape, has a moment of inspecting that. Is it pronounced Halligan bar? And mentions that he likes the way it feels, kind of in his head. But that's so I've got thought about the circular saw. That might be like the most gruesome kill in that movie. And do you think it's a nod to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at all?
That one was pretty sweet, a pretty sweet kill. I have to admit. I actually always thought that the Cannibal Corpse song "Killer Become" off their Skeletal Domain album would have been perfect music for that fight with the firefighters. In particular, there's a line in the song where Corpse Grinder shouts, "Fire up the chainsaw," and that just would have been sweet when the fireman pulls the cord on the chainsaw after seeing Michael emerge from the burning house with the halogen. But really, that whole scene was a series of pretty cool kills. But I'm going to save my favorite kill reveal until we get to it in the body count. As far as being a reference to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though, it certainly could be. But I personally have not heard that. I just took it as a tool a fireman would have at the ready.
I think Green kind of messed up not getting the rights to that song now that you kind of mention it. And honestly, I hadn't thought about any kind of possible Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference until we started doing this podcast and we found all the other Easter eggs. So I just wasn't sure.
I certainly get you thinking that, and it could be. Halloween 1978 may have started the golden age of slashers, but it was movies like Tobe Hooper's 1974 classic Texas Chainsaw Massacre that helped to pave the way. But let's count some more bodies. The next to go were the couple Phil and Sandra Dickerson, as they take slots 13 and 14 on the list. We saw Sandra as the escort in the graveyard for Aaron and Dana when they went to see Judith Meyer's grave. But here she gets a pretty cool kill when Michael stabs her in the throat with a broken light fixture. The blood fills up the end of the light fixture. That was just a really cool kill. Phil, on the other hand, was killed when he was impaled by the broken glass of a window through his neck and then playfully stabbed 4 times post-mortem with every knife Myers could find on their knife rack, but one which he took with him. That was pretty cool too. But we still haven't got to my favorite kill yet.
That was definitely kind of Michael working on his artistic expression with both of those kills. And in the novel, when Sandra is killed, she notices the light bulb is filled with her blood and mixed with the filament from the light. So she actually processes the thought that's actually quite beautiful and was wondering if Michael noticed that as well. And she even thinks, funny what you notice at the end.
That is a bit on the morbid side, but I like it. I'm sure my already dark humor would just be utterly abysmal at my death. so so I totally get that.
Do you think that Sandra is probably more on the morbid scale anyway, since she kind of runs the graveyard? Like, I know the guy that runs the local funeral home here, and he's got a very morbid sense of humor. I mean, he's a really nice guy and will do anything to help you, but just really kind of an odd duck, you might say. And I think that's just because of the nature of his job. So, that makes me wonder about Sandra. But anyway, let's keep counting these corpses. Perfect.
Actually, with her working at the graveyard, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure she already had a bit of a dark side. It's only natural being around death so much. Besides, humor is a great way to deal with things that are otherwise abhorrent. But back to counting corpses, as you said. Dennis, the kid wearing the skull mask from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, is next to die, but it is off camera. All we see is Michael holding the bloody mask. Marion Chambers, who was stabbed 4 times in the chest, was number 16, followed by Marcus Wilson, who was stabbed up through his eye and into his brain in a very cool kill, and actually my favorite kill. To finally answer your question, James, I just loved that. The knife through the eye up into the brain. That was just badass.
That was awesome.
Yeah, Vanessa Wilson was killed in an accident when Michael kicking the door open caused her to shoot herself in the head. And I personally hated Vanessa, so I was kind of happy about that.
I really think that has to be the funniest kill in Kills.
Right.
And at this point in time, I think I just have to ask, do you think Kills has the best kills in the trilogy? Maybe the franchise? I'm not sure, but there's definitely some memorable kills in this one.
I think I would go with the best kills in the franchise. But if not, it's definitely up there on the top. With the sheer number of awesome kills in it. Kills number 18 and 19 were Big John and Little John, and I have to say I liked them as a couple. And them dying was a bummer, even if I knew it would happen. But I will say that out of all the people I've ever seen Michael Myers kill, Big John and Little John are the only ones put in a romantic pose with a love song playing. Like, Michael knew music enough to pick out that song for them. I think that is about as close to romantic as Michael gets. But John was stabbed in the armpit and his eyes were gouged out. That was kind of cool. And Little John was stabbed in the chest and neck, although his death was off camera.
Okay, let's talk about Big John and Little John here for just a moment.
All right.
I really think they had to be the best additions for Halloween Kills, because I kind of think you're kind of on that same kind of trajectory. They certainly bring a certain amount of levity to the movie, and I mean, can you say they're the best deaths in the movie? Especially with how Michael kind of recreated their picture. So, because there is that kind of trend to like people like recreating a childhood photo or something like that now. But anyway, I think that's certainly kind of up there with like my favorite deaths in the franchise.
Oh, well, I know that How would I best end? I'm not sure that I would call them the best deaths in the movie, but it was definitely the best setup of the bodies afterwards.
Okay, that is a perfect way to put it, because it may not be the best deaths, but like the aftermath of it, that kind of artistic expression we talked about with Michael, definitely, that's a great way to put that.
Yeah, I absolutely adore Big John and Little John. They are definitely two of the best parts of the film. Their chemistry was just off the charts, and you just can't help but love them. And actually, I like them even more now that I think they're serial killer groupies.
Exactly.
The next person to die in the film, and easily the saddest death in the film, was Anthony Tivoli, who jumped to his death rather than face the psychotic mob who wanted to kill him for crimes he did not commit. Death number 22 was Lonnie Elam, who was mangled off camera. This was followed quickly by the death of Lonnie's son, Cameron Elam, who was stabbed twice in the stomach and was severely injured in the railing as he got bounced back and forth, busting all those things together. Had his neck broken as well. Number 24 was Sheriff Lee Brackett, who had his throat slashed. This was followed by the death of Tommy Doyle, who was stabbed in the chest and hit so hard with the baseball bat that it broke the thick end of it. Now, I have seen bats break on the thinner side before, but a serious amount of precision force would have to be required to break it on the thick end. But then he tops it off by stabbing him with the splintered end of the bat. I mean, that just, damn. 5 other people from the mob who went after Michael die in that same scene from stabbings and slashings, and their deaths take us up to 30 kills. Last but not least, Karen dies in the Michael Myers house in the theatrical cut. She was stabbed 9 times. However, in the extended cut, she was stabbed 17 times. Either way, that brings us up to 31 deaths in Halloween Kills, and I'm certain that was not an accident either. However, as Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills all happened on the same night, we're going to rack up the death toll to 49 deaths on October 31st, 2018.
You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I like to listen to ones that talk about like moral panics with like serial killers and kind of things like that. And this is kind of like our communal like fascination / panic when it comes to those. Like a lot of these like supposed serial killers have been thought to have killed hundreds of people over the years, or maybe very well thousands of them, and that there still could be like thousands of serial killers kind of in our midst. And you know, I say all that to say this. Michael went on a rampage in one night and killed 49 folks. We add that to his kill sheet in the 78 film, and where are we right now? Something like 70 some kills. Like, I really think that the folks behind this film took that idea of the serial killer panic that we had and leaned into it in a big way.
Oh, they definitely did. But I feel like I should clarify something about the kill count. We arrived at the number 20 kills for October 31st, 1978, because we added 10 kills from Halloween 2 from 1981, because it technically took place on the same night. But as you pointed out in our first episode, Halloween is a franchise of timelines, and the H40 trilogy only counts the first film, which had 7 deaths, including 2 dogs. But we're adding in the deaths from the novelization too. So we add 3 more onto that night from the novel, bringing the total to 10 kills. So if you add those 10 kills to the 49 from Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, then we're actually up to 59 kills. But you were still pretty close. That is a whole bunch. But to your point, that is a crap load of kills for a single serial killer to rack up in 2 nights. There may be serial killers out there that have killed hundreds. Like, for instance, Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who tortured and killed 80 confirmed girls and up to 570 more, as documented in her diary over a 20-year period in the 16th and 17th century. But nobody else has 59 kills in 2 nights that I know of. Well, that about wraps up another Countless Corpses podcast. This one ran a bit long, and we're sorry about that. But thank you for hanging out with us, and we hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it. Until next time, folks, I'd like to leave you with the words of Michael Myers, who said,